Assassin's Creed Shadows had to deal with a lot of backlash in the lead up to the release of this game. Of course, it's a massive franchise, a multitude of entries, but when they revealed that they were going to Japan, but spoiler alert, you're going to play as a fake black samurai Yasuke, people weren't exactly happy about it. There was a ton of viral backlash, a lot of downvotes. The trailer got absolutely annihilated. And we knew that everything was resting for Ubisoft because of the company's financial woes over the past few years, because of the flops and the disappointments and the out-of-control budgets. We knew this had to be huge. In fact, it needed to effectively be the biggest Assassin's Creed game we've ever seen. That's what Ubisoft themselves told us, that it needs to sell phenomenally well, even for an Assassin's Creed game. Well, Ubisoft has been doing everything in their power over the past few days since release to convince people that that's exactly what's happened, that this game is massively successful and all the haters were wrong. 2 million players were thrilled to celebrate this incredible milestone. 2 million players. Keep in mind, not copies sold, because it's not copies sold. It's players at this point in time. Now, when you do look at those said players, it's a little bit mixed. Now, there are some people out there that love this game, that say it's a return to form, that are like, wow, it's the best Assassin's Creed since insert name here. Most people just say since Black Flag. If you look at a lot of these similar mainstream shill accounts, there's a lot of other players that don't exactly feel the same way. They don't feel like the game was as polished as it should have been. They're not interested in the story or some of the characters. You see right there, 5.9 on Metacritic. But the real question that so many people have is, will this be a success for Ubisoft? And the tactic that Ubisoft has been taking over the past couple days is very, very interesting, in how desperate they are to tell people it's a success, but to not compare it directly to their most successful game. Assassin's Creed Shadows isn't the hit Ubisoft desperately needs, analyst says. This is coming from PC Games, and it's because of where the game is tracking right now. Assassin's Creed Shadows is selling well, but it's reportedly tracking behind AC Valhalla and falls short of 2025 hits like Split Fiction. And of course, these are talking about things, looking at Steam charts, looking at stuff like that. And yeah, when your game can't even hit Veilguard numbers on Steam, it's tough for people to believe it's as big of a success as Ubisoft is claiming. But when you do look at Assassin's Creed Shadows right here, they were hyped to say it's the biggest on Steam we've ever had. And it's true, because Assassin's Creed Valhalla didn't launch on Steam day one. It didn't launch until 2 years after. But Odyssey, 7 years ago at this point, did launch on Steam. You can see Assassin's Creed Shadows, and this is the peak. It's not going to get any higher than this at this point. It peaked at 64,000. Assassin's Creed Odyssey, almost 6.5, 7 years ago, when it was released, peaked at 62,000. Effectively the same numbers. Now, one of the big differences that we should point out is that Steam's user base is significantly higher now than it was in 2018 when Assassin's Creed Odyssey released. You had about 90 million monthly active users at that point. The number now is upwards of 130 million and hasn't been updated for a few years. So it's interesting, right, that they're saying, hey, it surpassed Origins, surpassed Odyssey, but fell a little bit short of Valhalla. Well, how far short? That fucking matters when you told us it basically had to be your best performing game ever. And we get some interesting numbers from inside Ubisoft. Tom Anderson tweeted this out. Behind the scenes data via Ubisoft sources. And these are people that have given him numbers before on, bad news for things like Star Wars Outlaws, shit like that before. Valhalla day one player numbers, 2.55 million on day one. Odyssey day one player numbers, 430,000. That's a big fucking gap in there. Shadows day two player numbers, 2.2 million, according to what Ubisoft is telling people right now. Now, that is significantly short. That day two number is significantly short of Valhalla's day one number. And interestingly enough, Odyssey did 3.4 million in its first month. These are not sales, by the way. These are players, not just sales. These are players. So when you look at Shadows, which is on Ubisoft Plus, which people can pay a $15 subscription to and have access to every Ubisoft game, that's probably where some of these things are getting made up as well. Now, Valhalla didn't launch on Steam, which means it didn't have access to the 100 million players, monthly active users on Steam, and still did numbers like that. But Ubisoft doesn't want you talking about this. In fact, they specifically told their employees, don't compare this to Assassin's Creed Valhalla for some reason. Leaked Ubisoft email says the pandemic is why Assassin's Creed Valhalla outsold Shadows on launch day, per IGN. It was a perfect storm we may never see again. And yes, this is from IGN, are the ones that published this, and it's not a great look necessarily for Ubisoft. Don't compare Assassin's Creed Shadows launch to the perfect storm Valhalla benefited from. Ubisoft internal email says, compare it to Origins, Odyssey, and Mirage. We still don't have a sales figure. That's the sub-headline right there from IGN. And it's true. We do not have a sales figure, and I doubt we ever will. There's enormous pressure on Assassin's Creed Shadows to do well for Ubisoft globally after a number of delays and the sales failure of last year's Star Wars Outlaws. Indeed, Ubisoft suffered a number of high-profile flops, layoffs, studio closures, and game cancellations in the run-up to Assassin's Creed Shadows, and they're currently in discussion to potentially be bought out. That's why this entire future of Ubisoft rests in the hands of Assassin's Creed Shadows. So the video game world is watching Assassin's Creed Shadows' early performance closely, looking for signs of success or failure. So far, they're yet to announce a sales figure, but it said it's hit 2 million players after just 2 days of launch. Ubisoft is telling employees that Steam played a major role in Shadow's performance on PC without revealing exact sell-through numbers. It says early results are a strong validation of our decision to return to the platform. Well, yeah, considering, like, there's probably, when you look at these numbers and you evaluate these things, there's probably somewhere in the realm of 300, 400,000 people that have purchased this on Steam that are to get those player count numbers where they are, right? That's a lot of additional ones that Assassin's Creed Valhalla didn't have when it launched. It did not launch on Steam day one, not until 2 years later. And it still had wild and crazy numbers. And they're telling people, right? Valhalla launched under extraordinary conditions in the middle of a global pandemic with widespread lockdowns and brand new console hardware. It was the perfect storm we may never see again. That's why it's more meaningful to compare Shadows to entries like Origins, Odyssey, and Mirage, games released in a more typical cycle. And in that frame, Shadows is setting a new bar, as illustrated above. This is what they're telling their employees, to not compare it to Valhalla, because that game had all the right conditions. You know, we can't expect to replicate our best-selling game before. It's unfortunate, isn't it, that you basically told everyone that this needs to perform essentially as your best-selling game for the survival of this fucking company, but now you don't want people comparing it, right? I always thought that this game, at the end of the day, was going to sell millions and millions of copies. The Assassin's Creed franchise is massive, and I think a lot of people are playing it on console, probably more, you know, in terms of numbers-wise, percentage-wise. When you look at the Steam numbers for Veilguard and Assassin's Creed Shadows, I think more people probably play Shadows over on a console versus people playing Veilguard on a console, right? I think that's reasonable. But still, there's a lot of things that don't fucking add up here. But Ubisoft is desperate to try to convince you, don't look at the data, don't look at these comparisons, just trust us. Don't compare it to Valhalla. Why would you do that? Just because the most successful game we released? No, stop doing silly things like that. Just focus on the positive spin we're trying to put on this. Time will tell. Time will certainly tell whether this is considered a success or a failure. But right now, some of these numbers don't really add up for Ubisoft.